Hi everybody, my name is Johan Swart. I must introduce myself because I haven't been on YouTube for quite a long time. First of all, I'm probably a fourth generation Boerboel breeder. My parents were well-known Boerboel breeders with Linger kennels. My grandfather was a Boerboel breeder, and he told us that his father was also a Boerboel breeder. So it's definitely 3 or 4 generations. I've also been an international judge and appraiser of Boerboels. I've been involved in writing the breed standards of most of the Boerboel associations across the world. I based all my work on reality. I'm a researcher, and that's why today I want to make a video and give some information. Let's call it a myth-busting session about the Boerboel and where the Boerboel comes from. Right, if we look at where do the rumors come from about where the Boerboel comes from, it's interesting. It's interesting to look at all the sources. And because I'm a student of reality and a researcher, I found it very confusing. And I realized that somewhere there's myths. Somewhere there might be reality. But somehow somebody's got to sort it out. Now, the very first source that I could find about the origin of the Boerboel is way before the establishment of the first Boerboel organizations. The first mention of the word Boerboel is not as everybody would have it nowadays, and that's myth number 1, that an organization was established in South Africa called the Suid-Afrikaanse Boerboel Teelers Vereniging, the South African Boerboel Breeders Association. And they got together, and at their first meeting they decided, we're gonna call this dog a Boerboel. Nope. Myth. Busted. Right. The first Boerboels were actually mentioned in 1896 in publications. If you read my handbook, I'm also the author of the handbook of the Boerboel, you will see that those are the first mentions of the name. So it was not thought up by the SABT or by some committee member or something, we're going to call this dog a Boerboel. It was already a Boerboel for a very long time. Also, if you look at the publications that were brought out in those days, the first one was in 1987. It was called the Boerboel Journal, or the Boerboel, and it was a little magazine which was brought out to celebrate the foundation of this organization and how the dogs are being developed. Now, in the second edition, something very interesting happens. The older breeders started joining the association and of very great interest, and anybody is welcome to read it in my book or to find the second edition or the third edition, I think it was the second or the third edition, of this little booklet of the SABT, the first ones that came out. There's a number of breeders in there in 1987 that alleged that they've been breeding for 40 years. 40 years of breeding takes us back to 1937. And the dogs were known as Boerboels. Okay, let's move ahead to the publication of the first proper handbook on the Boerboels. The Boerboels of Suidelike Afrika, the Boerboels of Southern Africa, was published by Mr. Bertus Grabe. Now, if you look at the back, it says he was the vice chairman of the SABT at that stage, and the book was only published in April 1995. So, human interference in this breed, in this Boerboel breed, has been very short. This is a book where it's got some rather artistic freedom pictures in it. Shows dogs with giant heads and very elongated bodies. But it was a very brave attempt by Mr. Grabe, whom I personally knew very well, and who gave to me his whole collection of documents and books regarding the Boerboel. Now, in this book, he makes the first statements on the history and the origins of the Boerboel. And he's got a prologue in here, and then he goes through the history of the Boerboel. And first of all, he says what the name means, and that the dog should not be called a boer dog, a boerhond, or a farm dog, because it was given a name Boerboel because it's a breed, and this name describes the breed, which is critically important when we look at what is now attempted to be included as the breed in the future. This breed was described very well in 1987 when the first Boerboel breed standard came out, which I will handle and address in another video. But very interesting is that Mr. Grabe here, as I said, he talks about the dog and the name of the dog and where it comes from, and that it can be seen as a true South African success story. And that lots have been written about the origins of the Boerboel. Now, people, I could not find nada. I could find nothing. Right. Before this date, the only thing that was published was in the little booklets, and it was just basically describing some things to do with the feeding of the dogs and this and that. Do yourself a favor, get hold of those booklets. But it does not describe the history, or especially the origin of the dogs. What he, however, says here, and this is myth number 2, is that when Jan van Riebeeck, the founder, the Dutch founder, who was sent to the Cape of Good Hope, or the Cape of Storms as it was known in those days, which is now known as Cape Town, when he was sent there, he brought with him a dog called a Bullenbijter, a Bullenbijter, right? And this dog is, according to Mr. Grabe, he was the one that was the founding dog, the F1 dog for this breed. Now, I found that a little bit strange. Mr. Jan van Riebeeck was the head of a mission. He lived in a castle. He was an important guy. Yes, the ship's manifest, when he loaded up in the Netherlands, showed that he did have a dog on board. A dog called a Bullenbijter. Now, what was a Bullenbijter? I went onto the internet and I searched. And I found the very popular picture, which Mr. Grabe also put in his book, of a giant Mastiff type of dog. But I also found an abundance of pictures of small terrier type dogs. And I thought to myself, was the Bullenbijter a breed? No. My further research showed it was not a breed. It was a function of a dog. It was a dog that was used to capture the bull's attention or grab it by the nose, and when the cattle, or the bull in this instance, had to be slaughtered, this dog would grab it by the nose, and while it's busy fighting it, the butcher could come in from the side with a sharp knife and physically cut the throat of the cat, or the cow, or the bull, or whatever. Okay, so the assumption that was made that the Bullenbijter was a giant dog, a big, strong, Mastiff type dog, is unfounded. There's no proof that Bullenbijters were Mastiffs. Bullenbijters was a function which a fox terrier could do, which any of the terriers could basically do bloody well, right? It was not a specifically Mastiff type dog. Yes, some of them might have been crossbreed Mastiffs or even pure Mastiffs of whatever sorts, but a Bullenbijter described a very wide range of physical appearances in dogs. Now the second thing is, nobody ever took the trouble to check Jan van Riebeeck's ship's register and diary. Skeepsregister en Dagjoernaal of Jan van Riebeeck is a well-published book, well known. If you read that, they list the items which was put on board of the ship when they left the Netherlands to come to the Cape. And then when they reached the Cape, the ship's purser, that was his job, again listed every item that was offloaded from the ship. Right? Because it's like a stock manifest. What you take is the stock you take down, but what got damaged and what got lost along the way and what was consumed along the way was never offloaded. Right? Now the dog, the Bullenbijter, appeared in the description of the goods that was loaded, but it was never offloaded in the Cape. The ship's purser was a very accurate person. His job was to make sure that everything happened well and was accurately recorded, and nobody stole anything. So that dog either died along the way, or somebody got fed up of it and chucked it overboard, or, I don't know what happened to it, but if it arrived in the Cape, that dog would have been listed as being offloaded in the Cape, and it's not. So that myth, according to me, is busted. Another thing we can look at is what are the chances of one solitary dog living in a castle belonging to the chief of the mission, the main settler, the big boss who was sent there by his Dutch masters, right? One dog in there, crossbreeding with all the Hottentot, the local African dogs with their little curly tails and their spitz faces, and creating a boerboel. Genetically, we now know that the Canis africanus, the true African dog, is a spitz type dog. And it originated from dogs that came down with the human migration down Africa and has its origins in Egypt. So to take a Spitz dog, combine it with a dog of unknown appearance, which assumably or somebody could suggest it could have looked like a Mastiff, to combine those two, while the one dog, the big dog, is in isolation in a castle, and then produce a dog that looks like a Boerboel, is highly unlikely. Very highly unlikely. I think that myth is truly busted.
Yes.
We continue with Mr. Grabe's book and his article on the history of the Boerboel in South Africa. Very interesting, the previous myth that we described as busted. He alleges here that what can be proven by research is that Jan van Riebeeck brought a Bullenbijter with him. Now, as we said, he loaded the Bullenbijter, but he did not bring it with him. It never arrived here. The second part in his paragraph is he said this dog was a big, strong breed, which reminds a person of a Mastiff type dog. Now, if you look on the internet, just go and Google it. You'll see, 5-6 different descriptions and sizes of dogs, and they definitely don't all look like Mastiffs, okay? The next statement here is that Van Riebeeck was followed to the Cape by other generations of Dutch people. And they also brought big and strong dogs with them. And over many decades, only the strongest of these dogs survived in this wild continent of Africa. Now people, to understand what happened in the Cape, you have to read up a little bit about the history of guys called the Here 17, the Gentlemen 17. They owned a shipping company, and the shipping company basically owned the Cape settlement. And anybody that came to the Cape settlement had to come with the Here 17, with the Dutch Masters 17 on one of their ships. And they charged a fee called passat. Now passat had to be paid. It's the passage fee for everything you put on board that ship. If you had a small little box, it got measured and weighed and everything, and you paid like a courier fee. You had to pay for a month's long trip on the ship. Then you had to pay for your cabin space, and you had to pay for the food that you eat. The Dutch have always been very, very shrewd businessmen, and they did not allow frivolous things to interfere with their business. And there is no record on any one of the following ships that came down to the Cape of any dogs being brought by any other settlers. Go and read up on the ship's journals. They are available in the archives. There is no record of that. So this part of the myth, unfortunately, Mr. Grabe, is busted. It's a good assumption, but it's not true. Okay, before I go into all the final statements and the rest of the statements there that Mr. Grabe made in a one-pager in his first book, I also found an envelope in Mr. Grabe's goods that he gave me at the back. It's from A.B.T. Grabe, PO Box Naboomspruit, South Africa. It's definitely a document that was drawn up by himself. And in it is a copy of the first page from his book. And that is then followed by a much more expanded discussion on the origins of the breed. But we will get into that later, because this was the source of the whole assumption that the Boerboel came from Assyria and Babylonia, and man, places with very romantic names and lots of allegations about the size of the dogs, and that they could kill elephants and that they could kill lions, and that they are, man, these dogs were amazing. Okay, but we will get back to this later. Most important is the fact that we looked at two myths. Only two for now. The one was the name of the dogs, the Boerboel, meaning the dog of the farmers. It did not originate with the foundation of the SABT. It originated in 1896 when the first reference was made to that name. That myth is busted. Second myth was that the dogs came from the dogs that Jan van Riebeeck brought to the Cape, called the Bullenbijter. That myth totally busted, because we could prove that Bullenbijters was not a breed. They were a description for a function of a dog, and these dogs had wildly differing appearances, and there's no proof that this dog even ever arrived in the Cape. It's on the ship's manifest as being loaded, but never as being offloaded. So let's stop now. Okay, obviously I'm making this video in little chunks. All this information is way too much to include in one video. So I'm going to, every time I will tell you this is the next video in my series, right? We can even use the same text, and I will then introduce the topic and we will go on with it. Okay, so this will be a sequential revelation of the information that I've researched. I understand that the information in this video might be upturning or overturning the apple cart, because these facts have been assumed for so long. But in order to get the full picture and to read the full and the whole story and all the research that went behind it, I invite all of you to get my book, The Boerboel, a revision of the origins and the history of the breed, written by myself, and in which all these theories and assumptions are well spelled out and detailed. In order to get more information on the book, just send an email to boerboelbook@gmail.com. Thank you for watching my video. If you like it, please leave a like. If you have a comment or question, please go to the comments or the question section and make your comment. I don't know if I'll be able to get to all the comments at the same time, but I will definitely try my best to answer you as soon as possible and as honestly and as possible, and based on true and actual information. Right? Don't forget, if you want to order the book, go to boerboelbook@gmail.com, and please subscribe to my channel, my YouTube channel, because if you're not subscribed, you won't get notification of when I issue the next video and the next bit of information, and that might be vital in your understanding of the breed. I thank you.